Echoes of Forgotten Worlds. Journey 2. Atlantis, the island beyond the pillars. Where did the world's greatest lost civilization first appear? Some legends are whispered around campfires. Others are carved into stone. The legend of Atlantis began with a philosopher, and a question that has echoed for more than 2,000 years. There are few names in history that inspire the imagination quite like Atlantis. Mention it almost anywhere in the world, and people immediately picture a magnificent island, golden temples, powerful kings, advanced cities, a civilization swallowed by the sea. But unlike many ancient legends, Atlantis has something unusual: a beginning, a writer, and a date. Its story does not emerge from forgotten folklore or anonymous storytellers. Instead, it begins with one of history's greatest philosophers, Plato, around 360 BC. The Greek philosopher Plato wrote two dialogues known as Timaeus and Critias. Within those pages, he described an extraordinary island kingdom, a civilization said to have existed thousands of years before his own lifetime, rich beyond imagination, powerful beyond comparison, and destined for a catastrophic end. According to Plato, Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Today, those pillars are widely understood to refer to the Strait of Gibraltar, the narrow gateway where the Mediterranean Sea meets the Atlantic Ocean. To the ancient Greeks, everything beyond that point belonged to the unknown, a place of mystery, storms, and endless ocean. Plato claimed Atlantis was no ordinary island. He described fertile plains stretching toward distant mountains, magnificent harbors, enormous canals, temples covered in shining metals, and a capital city built in perfect concentric rings of land and water. Unlike many myths, Plato gave remarkable detail: measurements, architecture, politics, even the names of rulers. So much detail that readers have debated one question for more than 2,000 years. Was he describing history or creating the world's greatest allegory? Most modern historians believe Atlantis was never intended to be a real place. Many see it as a philosophical lesson, a warning about pride, power, and the downfall of great nations. To Plato, Atlantis represented a civilization that had grown wealthy, powerful, and ultimately corrupt. Its destruction served as a moral lesson, not a historical record. That remains the view held by most scholars today. And yet, the story refused to disappear. Century after century, explorers searched for Atlantis. Some believed it rested beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Others searched near the Azores. Some looked toward the Caribbean. Others to Antarctica, the Sahara Desert, even the Mediterranean Sea. Generation after generation, the map changed, but the question remained the same. Could there be even the smallest fragment of truth hidden within Plato's story? History has taught us to be careful. Legends grow, stories change, memories become symbols. Yet history has also shown that myths sometimes preserve surprising echoes of the past. The city of Troy, long dismissed as fiction, was eventually discovered beneath the soil of modern-day Turkey. For centuries, many believed it existed only in Homer's poems, until archaeologists uncovered its walls, its streets, its history. Atlantis is not Troy. There is no archaeological evidence proving its existence. But Troy reminds us of something important. Sometimes, a legend begins with imagination. Sometimes, it begins with memory. Perhaps, that is why Atlantis continues to fascinate us. Not because we have found it, but because we have not. Every expedition, every underwater discovery, every ancient map adds another piece to a puzzle that may never be completed. So tonight, we stand where history ends and imagination begins, not to rewrite the past, but to explore one possibility. If Plato's description preserved even the faintest echo of a forgotten civilization, what kind of world would Atlantis have been? What did its people build? How did they master the sea? And how could an empire so magnificent disappear? In a single day? In a single night? Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, far into the Atlantic, the sea is calm. The stars shine above the horizon. And somewhere beyond the edge of the known world, a new journey begins. Recovered Fragment 2. The Empire Beyond the Horizon. What kind of civilization inspired the greatest legend ever told? Great civilizations are remembered by what they leave behind. Atlantis is remembered by what disappeared. Imagine standing upon the deck of an ancient ship. For weeks, Nothing has surrounded you except the endless Atlantic Ocean. The sea rises and falls beneath the hull. The stars have guided your journey. The familiar coastlines of the Mediterranean now lie far behind you. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the ancient world believed there was only mystery. Then, just before sunrise, someone points toward the horizon. Land, not a small island, an entire world. According to Plato's description, Atlantis was larger than any kingdom known to the Greeks. A fertile island surrounded by rich waters. Wide rivers crossed enormous plains. Forests covered distant mountains. Freshwater springs flowed from the hills. The climate was gentle, the harvests abundant. Nature itself seemed unusually generous. Whether this description reflected memory or imagination, no one can say, yet it painted the picture of a civilization blessed with extraordinary wealth. As the first light of morning touched the coast, the island slowly revealed itself. Massive seawalls guarded the natural harbors. Long stone piers stretched into calm blue water. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of ships rested safely within protected docks. Unlike the fishing boats of the ancient Mediterranean, these vessels were built for distant oceans. Broad, strong, graceful. Some carried spices, others precious metals. Others returned with goods from lands no map had yet recorded. Plato tells us Atlantis ruled many islands and distant territories. Its ships were the lifeblood of an empire connected by the sea. Beyond the harbor, white roads climbed gently toward the capital. Travelers spoke of gardens carefully arranged beside flowing canals. Bridges linked neighborhoods separated by clear water. Every building appeared planned. Nothing seemed accidental. The city had not simply grown. It had been designed. Even today, urban historians admire ancient civilizations that planned their streets with remarkable precision. If Atlantis had truly existed, it may have represented one of the earliest examples of an intentionally designed city. The farther one traveled, the more remarkable the architecture became. Columns carved from brilliant white stone, walls decorated with polished black basalt, bronze doors reflecting the morning sun. Plato even described rare metals unknown to most of the Greek world. Among them was a mysterious substance called orichalcum. Today, no one knows exactly what Plato meant. Some scholars believe it referred to a valuable bronze alloy. Others think it represented an idealized metal, added to emphasize Atlantis' immense wealth. Whatever the truth, the name has survived for more than 2,000 years. The people themselves were said to live in extraordinary harmony with the sea. Engineers directed rivers through carefully built canals. Fresh water reached every district. Ships moved freely between the outer harbor and the heart of the city. Nothing was left to chance. The sea was not feared. It was understood, mastered, respected, and at the center of everything rose the greatest wonder of Atlantis, a city unlike any other described in the ancient world, not built in squares, nor circles alone, but in a series of perfectly measured rings. Alternating bands of land and water, each connected by magnificent bridges, each protected by walls, each growing more magnificent as one approached the center. No city from antiquity has ever been found matching Plato's description. Yet few images in history have captured the imagination so completely. Even today, when artists paint Atlantis, they almost always begin with the rings. Imagine standing upon the highest bridge, looking outward. Ships arriving from every direction, canals reflecting the afternoon sun, markets alive with voices from distant lands. Beyond the city, green plains stretching toward snow-covered mountains. And beyond those mountains, an island so vast that no traveler had yet seen all of it. If this was only imagination, it was one of the greatest acts of imagination in history. If it was memory, then Atlantis may have been one of humanity's greatest achievements. But every remarkable civilization shares one dangerous illusion: the belief that greatness will last forever. The people of Atlantis could not know that history would remember them, not for how they lived, but for how they vanished. Far beyond the magnificent harbor, storm clouds begin gathering over the western horizon. No one in the city notices. Not yet. Recovered Fragment 3. The City of Rings. Why did Plato describe a city unlike any other in history? Some cities grow over centuries. Others are planned by kings. But Atlantis was said to have been designed as though every stone had been placed with purpose. Among all the details Plato left behind, None has captured the imagination of the world more than the capital of Atlantis. Not its wealth, not its armies, not even its mysterious disappearance, but its design. A city built in perfect circles, alternating rings of land and water. Even today, more than 2,000 years later, artists, historians, architects, and dreamers continue to recreate the same extraordinary image. Because no ancient city has ever been discovered that resembles Plato's description. According to Critias, the heart of Atlantis was not built by accident. At its center stood a small hill, a sacred place. Plato tells us that this was where Poseidon, the god of the sea, chose to dwell with a mortal woman named Cleito. To protect her, he surrounded the hill with alternating circles of land and sea. Whether this was meant literally or symbolically, no one can say. But from this story grew one of history's most remarkable city plans. Imagine approaching the capital by ship. The first thing you would notice would not be the palace. It would be the water. Wide canals stretched inland from the sea, allowing vessels to sail directly into the heart of the city. Bridges crossed the waterways, connecting each circular district. Merchants guided their ships through calm channels. Fishermen unloaded the morning's catch. Sailors from distant lands stared in silent amazement. For them, no city on earth looked like this. Each ring had its own purpose. The outer districts bustled with life. Warehouses overflowed with grain, timber, bronze, and pottery. Markets echoed with voices speaking many different languages. Craftsmen shaped tools. Shipbuilders repaired mighty vessels. The scent of fresh bread mixed with salt carried by the sea breeze. It was here that the empire's trade never seemed to sleep. Beyond the busy harbor districts, the city became quieter. Wide stone roads curved gently around sparkling canals. Elegant homes overlooked gardens filled with olive trees, flowering shrubs, and fountains fed by natural springs. Children laughed beneath shaded walkways. Musicians filled the squares with gentle melodies. Every neighborhood appeared connected, yet distinct. The rhythm of the city flowed as naturally as the tides themselves. As travelers crossed each bridge, the buildings grew taller. The stonework became finer. Bronze decorations reflected the afternoon sun. Columns of white limestone stood beside walls of polished black stone. Plato even described sections covered with a mysterious metal called orichalcum, said to shine with a reddish-golden light. No one knows exactly what orichalcum was. Some historians believe Plato referred to a valuable bronze alloy. Others believe it symbolized unimaginable wealth. Whatever its true meaning, its name has survived where the city itself has not. Finally, at the very center, rose the sacred district. This was the heart of Atlantis, a place reserved for its rulers, priests, and ceremonies. High walls protected magnificent gardens. Sacred fires burned day and night. Marble staircases climbed toward grand halls where the island's kings gathered beneath towering columns. Everything seemed designed to remind visitors of one idea. Atlantis was not merely prosperous. It believed itself chosen. Modern architects sometimes study Plato's description with fascination. A city divided by concentric waterways could have offered remarkable advantages. Ships could reach nearly every district. Trade could flow efficiently. Natural waterways might even have helped defend the capital against attack. Whether Plato imagined these ideas himself or drew inspiration from real engineering remains unknown. But even today, the design feels surprisingly advanced. As evening approached, thousands of lanterns reflected upon the canals. Their golden light shimmered across the water like a second sky. Music drifted from the marketplaces. The smell of roasted fish and warm bread filled the air. Ships rocked gently against their moorings. From the highest towers, the rulers of Atlantis looked across a city that seemed impossible to rival. Perhaps they believed it would stand forever. History has shown that many great civilizations shared the same belief. If Atlantis truly existed, its people could never have imagined that thousands of years later, the world would remember not its kings, nor its merchants, nor its victories. It would remember its silence. Far out on the horizon, barely visible against the fading light, dark clouds gather. The city celebrates another peaceful evening. No one looks toward the storm. Not yet. The greatest cities are not always those that survive, but those that refuse to be forgotten. Recovered Fragment 4. Masters of Engineering. How did Atlantis become one of the greatest builders ever described? Empires are not built by kings alone. They are built by countless hands that know exactly where every stone belongs. Every civilization leaves behind a signature. The pyramids belong to Egypt. The roads belong to Rome. The ziggurats belong to Mesopotamia. But according to Plato, the signature of Atlantis was engineering, not monuments built to impress, but systems designed to make an entire civilization flourish. As the sun rose over the capital, the city awakened with remarkable precision. Water flowed through carefully carved canals. Bridges connected every district. Ships entered the harbor without confusion. Markets filled with merchants arriving from every corner of the empire. Nothing appeared chaotic. Everything moved with purpose. Imagine standing beside one of Atlantis' great canals. Its stone walls were smooth and perfectly fitted. Clear water reflected the morning light. Cargo vessels drifted silently toward the city's warehouses. Workers unloaded timber from distant forests. Blocks of polished stone, bronze ingots, olive oil, wine, grain. Every shipment had its destination. Every dock had its purpose. Plato described a civilization rich in natural resources. Fertile land produced abundant harvests. Forests supplied timber for ships and buildings. The surrounding mountains yielded valuable stone and metals. Natural springs provided fresh water throughout the island. Whether these descriptions reflected reality or idealism, one message remained clear. Atlantis possessed everything it needed to become powerful. But resources alone do not create greatness. Knowledge does. Across the island, teams of builders worked together with astonishing precision. Surveyors measured foundations using ropes and carefully carved markers. Stonecutters shaped enormous blocks until each fitted perfectly against the next. Carpenters raised great beams into place. Blacksmiths poured glowing bronze into carefully crafted molds. Every craft depended upon another. Every worker understood that even the smallest mistake could weaken an entire structure. The greatest achievement of Atlantis may not have been a single building. It may have been its ability to organize thousands of people toward a common goal. Modern engineers often speak of planning, logistics, coordination. Without these, even the richest kingdom struggles to build. Plato's Atlantis seems to possess all three, not simply wealth, but remarkable organization. Fresh water flowed throughout the capital. Rainwater was collected and directed into reservoirs. Canals carried both ships and supplies. Wide roads connected distant farming villages to the bustling harbor. Even today, historians recognize that controlling water was one of the greatest achievements of ancient civilizations. Egypt mastered the Nile. Mesopotamia mastered its rivers. If Atlantis existed, its people may have mastered an island itself. Beyond the capital, the countryside revealed the same careful planning. Fields stretched across broad plains in neat divisions. Irrigation channels carried water to crops during the dry months. Stone watchtowers overlooked roads leading toward the mountains. Villages supplied food, timber, and skilled craftsmen to the capital. Nothing seemed isolated. Every community formed part of a much greater whole. Visitors from distant lands could hardly believe what they witnessed. Harbors large enough to shelter entire fleets. Bridges that seemed to float above shimmering canals. Storehouses overflowing with grain. Roads so well maintained that carts rolled smoothly for miles without interruption. To them, Atlantis must have seemed like a civilization from another age. Not because its people possessed magic, but because they had mastered planning. As evening approached, thousands of lamps illuminated workshops where craftsmen continued their labor. Bronze glowed inside the forges. Masons inspected freshly laid stone. Shipbuilders carefully examined every beam before another vessel entered the sea. The city never truly slept. Somewhere, someone was always building, always improving, always preparing for tomorrow. Perhaps that was the true strength of Atlantis. Not its gold, not its armies, not even its magnificent city. Its greatest achievement was the belief that every generation could build something greater than the one before. History has celebrated many civilizations for their ambition, but history also teaches us that ambition has no limit. Unless wisdom keeps pace with it, the builders continue their work. The harbor remains full. The city grows larger with every passing year. No one notices that the first cracks are beginning to appear, not in the stone, but in the hearts of men. The greatest structures are not always those built from stone, but those built from vision. Recovered fragment V. The Temple of Poseidon. What stood at the very heart of Atlantis. Every great civilization builds a place where earth meets the divine. For Atlantis, that place was said to stand at the center of the world. Every road in Atlantis seemed to lead toward one destination. Not the marketplace, not the harbor, not the palace, but the sacred hill at the center of the island's capital. It was here, according to Plato, that the story of Atlantis truly began. Long before mighty walls surrounded the city, long before ships crossed distant oceans, there was only a small hill, a quiet spring, and a legend. Plato tells us that Poseidon, the god of the sea, fell in love with a mortal woman named Cleito. To protect her, he shaped the land itself. Circles of water, circles of earth, a sanctuary unlike any other. Whether this tale was believed as history or honored as sacred tradition, we cannot know, but for the people of Atlantis, it explained why their city stood where it did. At the summit of the hill rose the greatest building on the island, the Temple of Poseidon. Its towering columns could be seen from nearly every district of the capital. White stone gleamed beneath the Mediterranean sun. Bronze-covered doors reflected golden light across the surrounding canals. Visitors arriving by sea often saw the temple long before they reached the harbor. It was more than a place of worship. It was the symbol of an empire. Plato described the temple as immense. Its walls were adorned with precious metals, gold, silver, and the mysterious metal known as orichalcum. Whether these details reflected reality or simply emphasized the city's wealth, they created one of the most unforgettable images in ancient literature. Imagine sunlight striking polished bronze, golden roofs glowing against a deep blue sky, water shimmering below, the entire sanctuary appearing almost to float above the city. Inside, the atmosphere changed. The sounds of the bustling capital faded. Footsteps echoed softly across polished stone floors. Incense drifted slowly through shafts of morning light. Tall columns disappeared into shadow high above. Every detail inspired silence. Every visitor was reminded that they stood within the most sacred place in Atlantis. At the center of the Great Hall, Plato describes an extraordinary sight, a colossal statue of Poseidon, standing proudly within his temple. He rode a magnificent chariot drawn by 6 winged horses. Around him, 100 sea creatures accompanied their king. The statue itself was said to shine with gold. Whether this monument truly existed or belonged only to Plato's imagination, its image has survived for over 2,000 years. Few descriptions from antiquity have inspired artists more, but the temple served another purpose. It united the rulers of Atlantis. According to Plato, the kings gathered here during sacred ceremonies. Before making important decisions, they offered sacrifices, swore solemn oaths, and reminded themselves that their authority came with responsibility. Power alone was never meant to rule Atlantis. Power was expected to answer to wisdom. As evening approached, priests climbed the temple steps carrying bronze lanterns. One by one, lights appeared around the sacred hill. Their reflections shimmered across the circular canals below. From every district, citizens paused to watch. For a few quiet moments, the entire city seemed united beneath the same glowing light. It was a reminder that no matter how vast the empire became, its heart remained here, upon this hill, within these walls. Perhaps that was the greatest purpose of the temple, not to impress visitors, but to remind the people of Atlantis who they believed they were. Builders, sailors, kings, families, all connected by a shared story. Every civilization needs such places, places where memory becomes tradition, and tradition becomes identity. Yet history teaches us something else. Magnificent temples cannot protect a civilization from its own choices. Stone remembers, but it cannot decide. Gold shines, but it cannot guide. Even the grandest sanctuary grows silent when those who built it forget the lessons it was meant to teach. Far beyond the western sea, the storm has grown larger. Still, the city celebrates. Still, the lanterns burn. Still, no one sees what is coming. Civilizations are remembered not only for the monuments they built, but for the values those monuments were meant to protect. Recovered Fragment 6. Masters of the Sea. How did Atlantis rule the ocean? Long before maps covered the world, There were those who believed the sea was not a barrier, but a road. Every morning, before the first markets opened, before the workshops filled with the sound of hammers, the harbor was already alive. Lanterns still glowed upon the piers. Sailors tightened ropes. Merchants counted their cargo. Shipbuilders inspected every plank before another vessel left the safety of the docks. The sea never slept. Neither did Atlantis. Plato tells us that Atlantis ruled many islands and territories beyond its own shores. Such an empire could not exist without ships. Powerful ships. Reliable ships. Ships capable of crossing waters that many ancient sailors feared, whether those voyages reached distant continents or only neighboring lands. We cannot know, but the sea was the empire's greatest highway. Imagine standing upon one of the great stone quays. Before you, hundreds of vessels gently rise and fall with the tide. Some are small fishing boats. Others carry grain from fertile plains. Large merchant ships arrive with copper, tin, fine timber, rare stones, olive oil, wine, and beautifully crafted pottery from distant ports. Every arrival brings new stories, new ideas, new opportunities. To the people of Atlantis, the horizon was never the end of the world. It was an invitation. Young sailors dreamed of distant shores they had never seen. Captains spoke of unfamiliar stars that guided them home. Navigators carefully recorded winds, currents, and the changing seasons. Long before the invention of modern instruments, the sky itself became their compass. At night, the ocean transformed. The sea became dark glass beneath countless stars. Experienced navigators could recognize familiar constellations with a single glance. They watched the rising of certain stars to judge the seasons. They learned to read the winds, the movement of waves, the flight of seabirds. Even the color of the water could reveal hidden reefs or nearby land. The ocean spoke its own language, and the sailors of Atlantis learned to understand it. Trade brought more than wealth. It carried knowledge, new crops, new tools, new ideas. A merchant returning from a distant island might bring an unfamiliar fruit. A craftsman could introduce a stronger method of casting bronze. An architect might discover a better way to build bridges. Every voyage changed Atlantis, even if only a little. Great civilizations rarely grow in isolation. They grow through connection. Not every voyage was peaceful. Storms could rise without warning. Powerful waves shattered masts. Dense fog concealed dangerous rocks. Entire crews sometimes disappeared beyond the horizon, never to return. The sea rewarded courage, but it demanded respect. Every sailor understood this. As the empire expanded, its fleet became more than a collection of merchant ships. Warships guarded trade routes. Patrol vessels watched the approaches to the capital. Signal towers stood along the coastline. At night, great beacon fires burned upon the cliffs. Their flames guided returning sailors safely home. For those lost upon dark waters, that first distant light was often the most beautiful sight in the world. Children growing up in Atlantis could always hear the sea. They watched ships arrive from lands they would never visit. They listened to travelers speaking unfamiliar languages. Some dreamed of becoming builders. Others wished to govern. But many looked toward the harbor and dreamed of sailing beyond the horizon. For them, the ocean was not something to fear. It was freedom. Perhaps that is why Atlantis became so powerful. Not because it conquered every land, but because it connected them. The sea carried its merchants, its explorers, its ideas, its ambitions. Every wave carried the empire a little farther from home. Yet, the sea remembers every voyage. It remembers every triumph, every mistake, every ship that never returned. And one day, it would remember Atlantis itself. The fleet continues to sail. The harbors remain full. The empire grows richer with every passing season. But somewhere, far beyond the familiar trade routes, the first whispers of conflict begin to spread, not through storms, but through men. The sea gives freely to those who respect it, but it keeps forever what it chooses to claim. Recovered Fragment 7. When power became pride. Can greatness become its own greatest weakness? Civilizations rarely fall at the height of their strength. More often, they begin to fall when they believe they cannot. There was a time when the people of Atlantis believed that greatness was a gift. Their prosperity came from hard work. Their ships crossed distant seas through courage. Their magnificent city stood because countless hands had built it together. Every generation remembered those who came before. Builders honored builders. Sailors honored sailors. Kings honored the laws. For many years, that was enough. But prosperity has a quiet way of changing people. Not all at once. Not in a single lifetime. Almost too slowly to notice. Children who had never known hardship grew into rulers. Grandsons inherited fortunes they had never earned. Palaces became larger. Gardens became grander. Feasts became longer. Luxury slowly replaced gratitude. Plato tells us that the rulers of Atlantis were descendants of Poseidon himself. As long as the divine nature remained strong within them, they governed with wisdom, justice, moderation. But over many generations, their mortal nature slowly became stronger. Their sense of balance faded. Whether Plato meant this literally, or as a lesson about human nature, his message remains timeless. Power alone is never enough. The city's marketplaces continued to flourish. The harbors welcomed more ships than ever before. Merchants counted fortunes beyond imagination. New districts expanded toward the coastline. Every year, the empire seemed stronger than the last. Few questioned whether endless growth was possible. Success can be comforting. Sometimes, too comforting. The kings still gathered within the temple of Poseidon. The sacred fires still burned. Ancient ceremonies continued. But traditions that once inspired humility slowly became displays of prestige. Grand processions grew more elaborate. Jewels became larger. Crowds applauded louder. Some came to honor the gods. Others came to admire themselves. Beyond the capital, the empire stretched farther across the sea. More islands accepted Atlantean rule. New ports were established. Trade routes expanded. The fleet became larger than ever before. To many, Atlantis no longer seemed like one kingdom among many. It seemed destined to rule them all. History offers many examples of this transformation. Empires rise through discipline. They expand through confidence. But confidence, if left unchecked, can slowly become arrogance. The lesson appears again and again. From ancient kingdoms, to powerful nations, to civilizations separated by thousands of years. The names change. The pattern remains familiar. Perhaps, that is why Plato's story has endured. It speaks not only about Atlantis. It speaks about us. Every generation believes it has reached the pinnacle of progress. Every generation imagines its achievements will last forever. Yet history quietly reminds us. Nothing built by human hands is beyond change. As the years passed, fewer voices urged caution. Builders continued raising magnificent monuments. The fleet continued conquering new trade routes. The people celebrated every new achievement. The city had never appeared more glorious. Yet beneath its polished stone, something invisible had begun to weaken. Not the walls, not the bridges, not the ships. Character. No earthquake had struck. No flood had appeared. The sea remained calm. The skies remained clear. The danger did not come from nature. It came from a belief. The belief that Atlantis had become untouchable. Far beyond the horizon, the ocean remained silent. Waiting, patient, as it has always been. The strongest walls cannot protect a civilization that forgets the foundations upon which it was built. Recovered Fragment 8. The Last Sunrise. If you had lived in Atlantis, how would your final day have begun? History remembers the day Atlantis disappeared. But no history remembers the morning before. Morning arrived as it always had. The first rays of sunlight touched the temple of Poseidon. Its bronze doors shimmered with warm light. The canals reflected the colors of the awakening sky. For the people of Atlantis, it was simply another beautiful day. No one imagined it would be their last. Along the eastern harbor, a fisherman quietly untied the ropes of his small boat. He had followed the same routine since he was a young boy. The sea was calm, the wind gentle. The gulls circled overhead exactly as they always did. He smiled. It will be a good day, he thought. The ocean offered no warning. Nearby, shipbuilders were already hard at work. Bronze hammers echoed across the docks. Fresh cedar beams were lifted into place. Young apprentices carefully sanded wooden hulls beneath the watchful eyes of experienced craftsmen. Another great trading vessel was nearly finished. Its captain hoped to sail within a few days. No one realized that ship would never leave the harbor. The city's marketplaces slowly filled with life. Merchants arranged baskets overflowing with figs, olives, fresh bread, colorful fabrics, and finely crafted pottery. Children ran between the crowded streets laughing. Musicians tuned their instruments beneath shaded archways. The smell of warm bread drifted through the morning air. To every visitor, Atlantis seemed as prosperous as ever. High upon the sacred hill, the priests climbed the long marble staircase toward the temple of Poseidon. Bronze lamps were extinguished as daylight filled the sanctuary. Morning prayers echoed softly beneath towering columns. They offered thanks for another peaceful day, for calm seas, for abundant harvests, for the continued strength of Atlantis. Their voices carried across the silent halls. No answer came, only the distant sound of waves. Outside the city, farmers worked beneath the warm sun. Water flowed gently through carefully built irrigation channels. Oxen pulled wooden plows across rich soil. Children gathered ripe grapes from vineyards stretching toward the hills. Life followed rhythms older than memory itself. Plant, harvest, rest, begin again. Far beyond the harbor, the great fleet continued its work. Merchant ships disappeared beyond the horizon. Warships patrolled familiar sea routes. Their white sails slowly became tiny points against the endless blue. The captains believed they would soon return home. Many never would. As afternoon arrived, the city grew even busier. Government officials discussed new trade agreements. Builders inspected another bridge nearing completion. Artists decorated freshly carved statues. Teachers gathered children beneath shaded courtyards to tell stories of the island's founders. Everywhere, people planned for tomorrow. No one planned for the end. Toward evening, families gathered beside the canals. Children floated small wooden boats across the quiet water. Their laughter echoed between the stone buildings. Elderly couples watched the sunset from shaded gardens. Friends shared bread, fruit, wine. Musicians filled the air with familiar songs. The city seemed peaceful, complete, almost timeless, as darkness slowly covered Atlantis. Thousands of lanterns reflected across the circular waterways. From the highest towers, the capital looked like a constellation fallen from the heavens. Perhaps no city had ever appeared more beautiful. Perhaps no people had ever felt more secure. Then, for just a moment, something unusual happened. A flock of seabirds suddenly abandoned the cliffs. Without explanation, they flew inland. Dogs that had slept peacefully all afternoon quietly stood. Horses lifted their heads. Fishermen looked toward the western sea. The water was strangely still. Not a single wave reached the shore. Only silence. Deep, endless silence. Most people noticed nothing at all. They returned to their conversations, their music, their celebrations. Night settled peacefully across Atlantis. The island sleeps. The lamps continue to burn. Parents kiss their children goodnight. Ships rock quietly in the harbor. No one knows that the sun which rises tomorrow will never shine upon Atlantis again. The greatest tragedies rarely announce their arrival. They simply begin, while life carries on as if nothing has changed. Recovered Fragment 9. One day, one night. How did the greatest legend of the ancient world come to an end? And in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared beneath the sea. Inspired by Plato's Critias. Not complete silence. The kind of silence that comes just before a storm. The wind had stopped. The sea was perfectly still. Even the gulls had vanished. Morning arrived, but something felt different. The fisherman who had left before dawn noticed it first. The water beneath his boat no longer moved with its familiar rhythm. The ocean seemed strangely heavy, as though holding its breath. Far behind him, the mountains of Atlantis stood quietly beneath a cloudless sky. Beautiful, peaceful, unchanged. Within the capital, life continued. Merchants opened their stalls. Children hurried through the streets. Builders returned to unfinished projects. The Temple of Poseidon welcomed another morning of prayer. No one imagined that history had already begun to change. Then, the ground trembled, so gently that many believed they had imagined it. A bronze cup rattled upon a wooden table. Birds resting upon the temple roof suddenly took flight. The water inside the canals formed tiny ripples. Then, everything became still once more. The city laughed. It was nothing. Work continued. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Without warning, a second tremor struck. Stronger. Stone walls groaned. Columns shivered. Dust drifted from ancient rooftops. In the harbor, ships collided gently against one another. Their captains stared toward the mountains. Confused, concerned. Then came a sound, unlike anything anyone had ever heard. Not thunder, not wind, not the sea. A deep roar, rising from beneath the earth itself. The island had begun to awaken. People poured into the streets. Parents searched for their children. Priests descended the temple steps. Builders abandoned their tools. Across the city, questions echoed from every direction. No answers came. Only another violent tremor. This time, the earth split. Stone roads cracked apart. Fountains overflowed. Marble statues toppled into the canals below. Far beyond the harbor, the ocean did something impossible. It began to retreat. The shoreline pulled away from the land. Ships settled awkwardly against the exposed seabed. Fish flapped helplessly upon wet sand. Children pointed in amazement. Many adults simply stood frozen. Never before had they witnessed such a sight. Today, we know that a rapidly retreating sea can precede a devastating tsunami. The people of Atlantis did not. Then, the horizon disappeared. Not beneath fog, but beneath water. A wall of water, stretching farther than the eye could see, growing larger, closer, relentless. Some prayed, some ran, some simply watched, unable to believe what they were seeing. The first wave struck the outer harbor with unimaginable force. Stone docks shattered. Ships were lifted like leaves before a storm. Warehouses vanished beneath crashing water. The roar drowned every voice, every bell, every prayer. The city fought to survive. Bridges collapsed into the canals. Buildings crumbled as the ground beneath them shifted. The magnificent temple of Poseidon, which had stood proudly above Atlantis for generations, disappeared behind clouds of spray and falling stone. Its bells rang only once more. Then, silence. The sea poured through every district. The rings that had protected Atlantis for centuries became channels through which the ocean rushed toward the city's heart. The very design that had once brought prosperity now carried destruction. By nightfall, fire and water shared the same sky. Lanterns floated across flooded streets. Fragments of roofs drifted upon dark waves. Families called for one another. Their voices faded into the storm. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the island was gone. Where a mighty empire had stood that morning, only the sea remained. Dark, endless, silent. Did Atlantis truly vanish in this way? History cannot answer. No archaeological discovery has confirmed Plato's account. Most scholars believe his story served as a philosophical warning rather than a historical record. Yet for more than 2,000 years, those final words have continued to echo across generations. In a single day and night, whether history, legend, or something between the two, Atlantis never returned. The storm fades, replaced by gentle waves beneath a sky filled with stars. The ocean keeps its secrets, sometimes for centuries, sometimes forever. Perhaps the sea did not erase Atlantis. Perhaps it simply became its final guardian. Recovered Fragment X. The search that never ended. If Atlantis was only a legend, why are we still looking for it? Some mysteries are solved by discovery. Others survive because they never are. The storm has passed. The great city is silent. Its temples, its harbors, its ships have vanished beneath the sea. For the people of Atlantis, the story had ended. For humanity, it had only just begun. More than 2,000 years have passed since Plato first wrote of Atlantis. Empires have risen. Empires have fallen. Languages have changed. Entire civilizations have disappeared into history. Yet one question continues to return. Where was Atlantis? Or perhaps, was it ever there at all? Most historians believe the answer is clear. They see Atlantis as a philosophical story, a lesson created by Plato to warn against pride, greed, and the misuse of power. From this perspective, Atlantis was never meant to be found. Its true location exists not beneath the sea, but within the human imagination. This remains the view accepted by the majority of scholars today. Yet curiosity has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths. Throughout history, explorers have searched for places once thought impossible. Some legends faded into myth. Others revealed unexpected truths. The ancient city of Troy, once believed by many to exist only in poetry, was eventually uncovered beneath layers of earth. Its discovery reminds us that history can still surprise us, but every mystery must be judged on its own evidence. And in the case of Atlantis, that evidence remains elusive. Over the centuries, many locations have been proposed. Some researchers have looked toward the Greek island of Santorini, where a massive volcanic eruption devastated the Minoan civilization around 1600 BC. Could memories of that disaster have inspired Plato's story? The dates do not match perfectly, but the idea continues to be discussed. Others point toward the Rikhat structure in Mauritania. Seen from space, its enormous circular formations resemble the famous rings described by Plato. Could this remarkable geological formation have inspired later legends? Most geologists conclude that it is a natural structure formed over millions of years. Yet its unusual appearance continues to capture imaginations around the world. Still others have searched beneath the waters near the Azores, along the coast of Spain, in the Mediterranean Sea, even beneath the Antarctic ice. Each new theory brings fresh excitement. Each expedition raises new questions. So far, none has produced convincing evidence that Atlantis once existed as Plato described it. Perhaps that is why the legend has endured. If Atlantis had been discovered beyond all doubt, its mystery would have ended. If it had been proven impossible, the story might have faded long ago. Instead, it remains suspended between history and imagination, neither confirmed nor forgotten. Maybe that is where Atlantis truly belongs, not beneath the ocean, but within the questions we continue to ask. How do great civilizations rise? Why do they fall? Can knowledge survive disaster? Can power exist without wisdom? Those questions remain as important today as they were in Plato's time. Whether Atlantis was a real island, a distant memory, or a philosopher's warning, its greatest treasure was never gold. It was the conversation it began, one that has continued for more than 23 centuries, and perhaps will continue for many more. Somewhere beneath these waves, there may be nothing, or there may be stories still waiting to be told. The sea keeps its silence, and we continue to listen. Every forgotten world leaves behind an echo, sometimes in stone, sometimes in memory, and sometimes only in the questions we continue to ask. Our journey through Atlantis has come to an end. We began with the writings of Plato. We explored an empire of magnificent harbors, master builders, and fearless sailors. We witnessed the pride that slowly grew within a powerful civilization, and we imagined its legendary final day beneath the sea. But through every chapter, one principle remained the same. History deserves honesty. Where evidence exists, we follow it. Where uncertainty begins, we acknowledge it. And where imagination takes over, we make that clear. Because the greatest mysteries are not diminished by truth. They are enriched by it. Our journey through Atlantis has come to an end, but another mystery awaits beyond the horizon. Far across the vast Pacific Ocean, legends speak of another forgotten land. A continent that appeared on no ancient map, yet captured imaginations around the world. Was Mu a lost civilization, a misunderstood legend, or simply a dream born from humanity's endless search for its origins? In our next journey, we will follow that mystery. Journey 3. Mu, the continent that never appeared on any map. Until then, good night.